Hello, thank you for joining today's webinar talking about CMMC 2.0. This webinar is going to focus on the three things that you should be doing right now. Honestly, there's tons of things that you should probably be doing right now, but these, in my opinion, are probably the most important, or at least the top three things that should be considered. My name's Johan Detweiler. I am the Director of Operations with Cerberus Sentinel. I have a lot of experience with government compliance, the FedRAMP program, the FISMA program, and I've also been reading up and studying the CMMC 2.0 program since its inception. So I hope I can give you some valuable information here. So my number one consideration that I recommend every organization take a look at is scoping your boundary. So it's very important to understand that while CMMC is an organizational certification, it's a certification that focuses on an organizational system. That's defined in NIST 800-171 Revision 2 on page 10. You'll see there's a call-out box that says what an organizational system is. The important thing to understand is that basically it's any component that has the ability to process, store, or transmit CUI. So it's very important when you're designing your boundary that you take into consideration only those components that are going to be interacting with CUI. And you want to explicitly exclude any components that are not going to have the ability to process CUI. This refines your boundary and it makes complying with CMMC 2.0 less resource intensive because you're only applying the requirements of CMMC 2.0 at the areas where they're specifically needed. So you're not working to, secure hosts or implement encryption on hosts that are not going to ever touch CUI. You're only doing it where it's absolutely necessary. And it's very important that this boundary be as small and as targeted as possible. You really want to focus on only those components that are going to process CUI. Now, hand in hand with that is my second recommendation, which is that you have to understand the type of CUI data that's going to be processed within your system. There's some types of CUI data that have additional handling caveats and additional security requirements above and beyond what's talked about in CMMC 2.0. So while you may be compliant with CMMC, you may not necessarily be meeting the requirements of the data that you're processing. The DoD has a Cui registry that you can go to understand what type of data you may be processing. Also, each additional agency within the DoD tends to have their own rules and guidance that kind of outlines any special handling caveats or any additional requirements that they may have. Now, this is really important to understand because certain types of CUI data have very explicit handling caveats. Some of the best examples, of course, are ITAR or EAR data, where that type of data is only allowed to be processed, stored, or transmitted within the continental United States and is only allowed to be accessed by US persons. So if you think about that, there's a lot of organizations out there that use Microsoft Office 365. Now, the commercial version of that is a global service, and that explicitly cannot meet the requirements of ITAR and EAR. It would not meet the special handling caveats. So it's very important that going in as you're sort of designing what your boundary and what your network is going to look like, that you understand that if you have data that has sensitive handling caveats, special handling caveats, you may actually be required to design the system to ensure that it remains in a certain location and it's being accessed by the appropriate personnel. So it's very important that you understand that going in. The last thing I recommend, my last recommendation is that you select appropriate third-party services. So if you're going to utilize a third-party service to help you implement any of the CMMC 2.0 requirements, it's absolutely vital that you select service providers that can be compliant with CMMC 2.0 themselves. Now, DoD and the Cyber AB have both said that FedRAMP, moderate, or equivalent are acceptable to meet the compliance requirements of CMMC 2.0. In addition, you could ask that the third-party vendor provide some sort of independent verification that an independent group has come in, reviewed their compliance, and has determined that they are in fact in line with CMMC 2.0. So there's multiple ways to kind of go about it, but it's very important that you select a service that you know can be compliant. In the future, as everyone starts to go through these CMMC 2.0 assessments, if your third-party provider goes through an assessment and is unable to achieve the level of certification needed, that means that your network and your system is no longer going to be compliant, because those services are part of your network. They're part of your system. And in order for you to implement the CMMC compliance appropriately, you need to make sure that your service providers are doing it as well. So there's a big risk there in not knowing the compliance ability of your third-party service providers. One of the places that you can go to that will kind of give you a leg up is the FedRAMP.gov marketplace. That marketplace lists all of the currently FedRAMP moderate or high authorized systems. And so that will allow you to kind of shop, as it were, for potential third-party service providers. So those are my top 3 recommendations. Obviously, there's so much more that we could go into. But those are 3 really, really key areas that need to be considered as you all start on your CMMC 2.0 journey. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us today, and please join us for future webinars where we'll break down CMMC 2.0 a little bit more. Thank you.